all day.
What's up, guys? Welcome to the ShipFlip channel. I wanted to talk to you today about retail arb and put something on your radar for retail arbitrage that you may not have considered yet if you just got started. Now, I know I've talked to you about starting off kind of in your basements, garages, and you'll see other people say the same. Maybe just sell stuff out of your house first to build up some cash flow and then use that to invest in the stuff you want to sell. And so maybe you want to sell shoes out of Marshalls or TJ Maxx like you've seen in some of my other videos, and you want to get involved in retail arb. So I wanted to put something on your radar so that you're aware of it for when you're sourcing in these retail stores. And that's volume and availability, right? And that's sales volume that you're looking at when you look up sold prices and availability of that item on the internet, right? Those are two very important things to consider when you're retail arbing. And what I mean by retail arbitrage, it's just flipping, but out of retail stores as opposed to thrift stores and yard sales and stuff like that. It's actually my preferred method of sourcing. I'm much better at retail arb than I am thrift sourcing, and I think it's just an easier model, but the margins are lower and there are some things that can get you into some trouble. So the number one thing to think of when I talk about sales volume and that is that you have to understand that other people are sourcing the same stores you are, and you have to make sure that the item that you're seeing that you just looked up that has a great flip margin, that it isn't something that everyone else in the entire nation of Marshalls, TJ Maxx's, or whatever store that you're sourcing at that moment aren't looking at as well. And because what happens there is if everyone at once goes to put that then up at the same time for the same price, then the competition just increased all at once. The gates just flooded all at once. And so it becomes harder at that exact moment to sell the item you found than it was previous to that. And so you're looking at sales data and sold prices that don't really correspond with the product you're picking up because the volume and availability of that product have just changed completely, right? And so you really, really need to do your homework before you get into retail arb, and you really need to start figuring things out and finding ways around those terrible buys, because what ends up happening is you think it's a good flip, you invest a bunch of money into it, and then it sits, and all your money that you worked hard that you could be flipping on easier flips is tied up in that stuff, and it's not selling because everyone else pulled the same item out of the store. And so you really want to look at that by when did this item hit your store, and then kind of gauge when are these sales from this item showing. So, you know, the eBay shows you the last 60 days of sales. Well, you want to make sure that those sales are still currently the same. And so, although that might not stop you from making a foolish purchase, it is something that you need to consider. So tread lightly and understand that what you're looking at might be just a regional thing. And if it is, then that's a good thing. If it's not just a regional thing and the volume and availability of this item has exploded, then you're going to end up not selling the item. And this is especially bad, not just for eBay, but this is especially bad for Amazon FBA, because then you send a bunch of stuff to the warehouse that sits there, and if it doesn't sell within a certain time, you get hit with fees and all this and that. And so you want to stay away from that situation as much as you want to stay away from investing a bunch of money into products that aren't going to sell. So keep that on your radar when you're looking items up. Look at the scarcity of the item and the availability. If there's a ton of it available out there and it's selling, but there's a ton of it like listed for sale, you might want to consider passing on that item. If there's not a ton of it available for sale, you might want to hurry up and get it up there and sell it before it's flooded, right? So those are the two things you need to think about there on that. Definitely when you see an item and you find it, if there's a ton of them available that haven't sold, because like I said before, you want to look up sold prices and current listing prices to gauge where you're going to put yours. If there's a ton available and none have sold, then you know that's not a good seller, right? If there's a ton sold and none available, then you know that's a buy this right now item, right? And if there's a ton sold and a ton available, then you know that that's probably kind of the middle ground where I might have a good flip on my hands here, but it looks like the market's getting flooded. So definitely check all of those variables to figure out whether you think your item is a good buy or not. But I just wanted to, at the very least, put on your radar that you don't want to just blindly go look something up, see that it's got a ton of sales and is selling well, and then go blow it out. You need to consider that this item could be something that's a very high volume item that's going to become available or already is available to a ton of people now, more so than it was when those sold prices were showing. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense to you. So the sold prices were from a time period when the availability of the item was not very good and you couldn't pull it off of a shelf clearance rack. But now that there's a ton of it available on a clearance rack, the availability of the item kind of changes, right? And so you need to consider that. So put that on your radar. Consider that when you're making retail arb purchases. Do not purchase more or a bunch of something that is just going to sit. That's what you want to avoid. So think of different ways, but I've given you a couple different ways here in this video that you can kind of look up different sales data and figure out whether this is something that's going to flop or something that needs to be bought right now or something that we want to avoid. But either way, do your due diligence, figure out your own processes as well, but make sure you're factoring in the volume and availability of an odd item before you purchase it for retail arbitrage. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope this was useful to you. I hope this saved you from buying a bunch of stuff that isn't going to sell or is going to flop. And it also put your radar up into the idea of looking at various factors before we buy something to resell. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and like it, comment some things that you've purchased that were terrible sellers, or comment some ways that you've figured out to know whether an item is going to be flooded on eBay here shortly, or if it's something that you found that's not going to be somewhere else. If you want to see more content like this, go ahead and subscribe to the page. If not, head on over to my Twitter or TikTok. Those are both ShipFlip as well, Sean Riley. But in the meantime, keep flipping and have a great day.